2 weeks after burying my wife, my daughter handed me legal papers accusing me of stealing her inheritance. "You manipulated Mom when she was dying," she said coldly. I was expecting grief support, but found courtroom threats instead. They froze every account, spread vicious rumors through Charleston, and hired thugs to intimidate me into surrendering everything my wife and I built in 38 years. They thought the old firefighter was broken and powerless. But they never expected that one person knew everything and had been documenting every single detail for 2 years. When that angel in white stepped through the courtroom doors, my daughter's screams of protest echoed through the halls non-stop. "I'm genuinely grateful you're here. If this story already speaks to you, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. I read them all. And it reminds me we're not alone in stories like this. Please keep in mind, certain details in this story are dramatized for learning and narrative clarity. Any similarity to real names or settings is coincidental, but the lesson behind it is important. The house felt too big without her. I stood in the center of our bedroom at 214 King Street, surrounded by cardboard boxes and the ghost of Josephine's lavender perfume. 2 weeks since I'd laid my wife to rest, and I still couldn't bring myself to pack away her things. Every item I touched: her reading glasses on the nightstand, the cashmere sweater draped over her favorite chair, the stack of unread novels on her side of the bed, felt like pulling fragments of her away from me piece by piece. Charleston's morning light filtered through the plantation shutters, casting amber stripes across the hardwood floor. Outside, the sounds of King Street stirred to life, tour carriages clattering past, the distant call of vendors at the city market. The rhythm of the city continued, indifferent to the fact that mine had stopped completely. Josephine had passed away from Alzheimer's after 2 brutal years of watching the woman I loved slip away in increments. Some days she'd known me. Most days toward the end, she hadn't. But there were moments, bright, piercing moments, when she'd surface from the fog, squeeze my hand, and look at me with those clear, hazel eyes that had captured me 40 years ago. I pulled open the drawer of her writing desk, the one she'd inherited from her grandmother. Inside lay stationary old birthday cards I'd given her, photographs of better days. My hand trembled as I reached for a cream envelope tucked beneath a stack of letters. The handwriting on the front was shaky, but unmistakable. "For Clayton, when you need to remember." I sank into the chair, the envelope heavy in my hands. The date on the back, November 2023, 4 months ago. One of her last lucid days. I broke the seal. "My dearest Clayton, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I don't know how much time I have left before the fog takes me for good, but I need to write this while I still can. I'm so sorry for what's coming. I'm sorry you'll have to face it alone. Don't let Lillian destroy what we built together. I know our daughter. I know what she's capable of when she wants something. She's been circling for months now, asking questions about the house, about our accounts, about my state of mind. She thinks I don't notice, but a mother always knows. The open book. This house, our life, we earned every bit of it. Protect it, my love. Not for the money. For us. For what we meant to each other. I wish I could be there to fight beside you, but you're stronger than you know. All my love, always, Josephine." The letter blurred in my vision. I pressed my palm against my eyes, my chest tight with a grief so raw it felt like drowning. She'd known. Even through the Alzheimer's, even when she couldn't remember my name some days, she'd seen what I'd refused to believe. Our daughter was coming for everything. The doorbell rang, sharp and insistent. I folded the letter carefully, tucked it back in its envelope, and walked downstairs. Through the frosted glass of the front door, I could make out the shape of a courier, his clipboard already raised. "Clayton Merrick." "Yes." "Sign here, please." The envelope he handed me was thick, official. The return address made my stomach drop: Kingsley and Associates, Attorneys at Law. I carried it to the kitchen table, Josephine's letter still clutched in my other hand. For a long moment, I just stared at both envelopes, one from my wife, one from my daughter's legal team. Then I opened the second one. Emergency petition for asset transfer. Lillian Merrick versus Clayton Merrick. The words jumped out at me in bold type. Elder abuse, undue influence, financial exploitation, cognitive impairment of decedent, immediate asset freeze pending investigation. My daughter was suing me. Not just suing, she was accusing me of manipulating her mother, of taking advantage of a sick woman, of stealing what should have been rightfully hers. I read through the petition twice, my hands shaking harder with each paragraph. According to the document, I'd isolated Josephine from her family. I'd coerced her into changing her estate plan. I'd enriched myself at her expense during her vulnerable state. Every word was a lie. Every word would need to be defended in court. I grabbed my phone and pulled up Lillian's contact. The call went straight to voicemail. Her voice, professional, clipped the same tone she used with clients at her corporate law firm. "Lillian, it's your father. I just got the papers. We need to talk. Please call me back." I tried again. Voicemail. Again, voicemail. She wasn't going to answer. She'd already made her choice. I set the phone down and looked at the petition again. The response deadline glared up at me from the bottom of the page: 48 hours to file an answer or risk default judgment. 2 days. I had 2 days to find a lawyer, to gather documentation, to build a defense against my own child. 2 days to figure out how to fight for the home Josephine and I had bought when Lillian was just a baby, for the bookshop where my wife had spent 30 years building something beautiful, for the life we'd created together. 2 days, and I had no attorney, no strategy, no idea how to navigate the legal system that my daughter, a corporate lawyer with resources I couldn't begin to match, had just weaponized against me. I spread both letters on the table before me, Josephine's words of warning, Lillian's declaration of war. The sunlight shifted, casting long shadows across the kitchen. Somewhere in the house, a clock ticked steadily forward. Outside, Charleston moved on with its day, oblivious to the fact that my entire world had just fractured. I stared at the petition, at my daughter's name printed in cold legal type, at the accusations that would force me into a courtroom to defend my love for my wife. I have 2 days to figure out how to fight my own daughter in court. I don't even know where to start. 3 days had passed since I'd opened that legal envelope, and I still didn't have a plan. The courthouse steps felt steeper than they should have as I climbed toward the entrance of the Charleston County Judicial Center that morning, my hand gripping the metal railing for support. In my other hand, I clutched a thin folder, everything I'd managed to gather in 72 frantic hours: Josephine's death certificate, our marriage license, a handful of bank statements. It wasn't enough. I knew it wasn't enough. The folder had cost me 3 sleepless nights and a dozen unanswered calls to attorneys who either wanted retainers I couldn't afford or didn't take emergency cases. In the end, the court had assigned me someone, a public defender, stretched thin across too many cases, who'd met me for exactly 17 minutes in a windowless room an hour earlier. "She'd just be honest," he'd told me, barely glancing at the documents I'd brought. "The judge will see you're a good man." I'd wanted to believe him. Then I saw her. Lillian stood near the security checkpoint, her back straight, her dark hair pulled into the same sleek bun she wore to depositions. Next to her, a man in a charcoal suit adjusted his cufflinks, Douglas Kingsley, according to the letterhead I'd memorized by now. His briefcase probably cost more than my monthly pension. I started toward them, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Lillian!" She turned her head fractionally, just enough that I knew she'd heard me. Then she walked through the metal detector without breaking stride, Kingsley following close behind. She hadn't looked at me, hadn't paused, hadn't acknowledged that the man calling her name was the one who'd taught her to ride a bike, who'd walked her down the aisle at her wedding, who'd held her mother's hand while she slipped away. The security guard waved me through. I fumbled with my keys, my wallet, the folder that suddenly felt impossibly heavy. By the time I reached the courtroom, Lillian was already seated at the plaintiff's table. Her posture perfect, her hands folded on top of a leather portfolio. Kingsley sat beside her, flipping through notes with the ease of someone who'd done this 1,000 times before. I took my seat across the aisle. My court-appointed attorney, a young man with tired eyes and a tie that didn't quite match his wrinkled shirt, arrived moments later, dropping into the chair beside me with a sigh. "All rise." Judge Miriam Ashford entered from the side door, her black robe swishing as she took the bench. She was 60-something, with silver-streaked hair, and the expression of someone who'd heard every excuse, every plea, every broken promise the legal system had to offer. She settled into her chair and opened the file in front of her without preamble. "Emergency petition for asset transfer. Merrick versus Merrick. Counsel proceed." Kingsley rose smoothly, buttoning his suit jacket with practiced precision. When he spoke, his voice filled the courtroom, confident, measured, devastatingly polite. "Your Honor, this is a straightforward matter of protecting a vulnerable estate from potential mismanagement." Maz Tuckin. Josephine Merrick passed away 3 weeks ago after a prolonged battle with Alzheimer's disease. During that time, my client, Mrs. Merrick's only daughter, observed a pattern of concerning behavior from the respondent, Mr. Clayton Merrick. I gripped the edge of the table. Financial transactions that Mrs. Merrick would never have authorized. Isolation from family members who attempted to visit. And most troublingly, changes to estate documents executed during a period when Mrs. Merrick's cognitive capacity was severely compromised. He paused, letting each word settle like stones in water. "We're not here to make accusations, Your Honor. We're here to ensure that Mrs. Merrick's true wishes, the ones she expressed before her illness, are honored. That requires a temporary freeze on all estate assets until a full accounting can be conducted. My client simply wants to protect her mother's legacy." He sat down. The judge's gaze shifted to my side of the room. My attorney stood his chair, scraping loudly against the floor. He opened his mouth, hesitated, then glanced down at the notes he'd scribbled during our brief meeting. "Your Honor, Mr. Merrick was a devoted husband. He cared for his wife for 2 years without complaint. The idea that he would exploit her during that time is... Does your client have documentation to counter the petitioner's concerns?" Judge Ashford's tone wasn't unkind, but it was direct. My attorney blinked. "We're working on gathering..." "I'll take that as a no." The judge made a notation in her file. She looked at me directly, her expression softening just slightly. "Mr. Merrick, I understand this is an emotional time. Losing a spouse is never easy, and I don't doubt you loved your wife." The words sounded like consolation. They felt like a verdict. "But I have to make decisions based on what's in front of me. Right now, the petitioner has raised legitimate questions about estate management during a vulnerable period. Until we can establish a clear timeline and accounting of all transactions, Your Honor, I can explain." The words burst out of me before I could stop them. "I took care of Josephine every single day. I fed her, bathed her, sat with her through the nights when she didn't recognize me." Judge Ashford raised her hand gently. "Mr. Merrick, I'm not questioning your devotion. I'm simply ensuring that the estate is protected while we sort through the details. The court is ordering a temporary asset freeze until the next hearing. You'll have an opportunity to present your case with proper documentation at that time." The gavel came down. Just like that, it was over. I sat frozen as the courtroom emptied around me. My attorney mumbled something about paperwork and next steps, but his voice sounded distant, muffled, like I was underwater. Across the aisle, Lillian stood smoothing the front of her tailored jacket. Kingsley leaned in to whisper something to her. She nodded once, then gathered her things with the calm efficiency of someone who'd just finished a routine meeting. I watched her walk toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. She didn't look back, didn't hesitate. Outside the courthouse, I caught a glimpse of her through the glass doors. A black sedan waited at the curb, sleek, expensive, probably a town car Kingsley had arranged. The driver held the door open. Lillian slid into the back seat, her phone already pressed to her ear, her expression smooth and untroubled. The car pulled away from the curb, merging into Charleston's late-morning traffic. I stood on the courthouse steps, my folder of inadequate documents tucked under my arm, watching the sedan disappear around the corner. The way she climbed into that expensive car, like she'd just won something. Not like she'd just buried her mother. By Monday morning, 4 days after the hearing, it seemed like half of Charleston knew about the lawsuit. I arrived at Station 5 early that day, the way I always did when I taught the EMT certification course. 20 years of volunteer work at the firehouse had earned me a small side gig teaching emergency response techniques to new recruits. It wasn't much, but it kept me busy, kept me from rattling around that empty house on King Street, with nothing but Josephine's absence for company. The recruits were already waiting when I walked into the training room, clustered near the coffee station, in that nervous way first-day students always did. I set my materials on the desk and turned to write the day's agenda on the whiteboard. Behind me, the conversation died. I glanced over my shoulder. 6 faces stared back at me, some curious, some uncomfortable, all suddenly very interested in their notebooks. One of them, a kid barely out of high school, nudged his neighbor and whispered something I couldn't quite catch. I cleared my throat and kept writing. The class dragged. Every question I asked hung in the air too long before someone answered. Every demonstration felt like I was performing for an audience that had already made up their minds about me. By the time I dismissed them, my jaw ached from keeping my expression neutral. Chief Eugene Tucker caught me in the hallway as I was packing up. Clay. He pulled off his reading glasses the way he always did when he had something difficult to say. Got a minute? I followed him into his office, a cluttered space that smelled like old coffee and diesel fuel. Eugene had been my friend for 30 years, ever since I'd joined the volunteer corps fresh out of high school. He'd been the one to promote me to lieutenant, the one who'd let me cry in this very office the night Josephine's diagnosis came back. Now he couldn't quite meet my eyes. There's been some talk, he said, finally leaning against his desk. Around town, about the lawsuit. What kind of talk? Eugene shifted his weight. Just rumors, Clay. You know how this city is. People like to gossip. What are they saying, Eugene? He rubbed the back of his neck. Maybe you should take some time off from teaching, just until things settle down. For your own sake. My chest tightened. You're asking me to leave. I'm asking you to let this blow over. His voice was gentle, apologetic. The board's getting calls from parents. They're concerned. Concerned about what I've been teaching this course for a decade. I know that, Clay, but perception matters. And right now, he trailed off, spreading his hands helplessly. Just give it a few weeks. Please. I walked out of the station with my teaching materials under my arm and a hollow space where my pride used to be. The next morning, I needed groceries. Mrs. Henderson was in the produce section when I walked into the Harris Teeter on East Bay Street. She'd been our neighbor for 15 years, the kind of woman who brought casseroles after funerals and watered your plants when you went on vacation. She'd been at Josephine's memorial service, tears streaming down her face as she hugged me and promised to check in. Now she saw me reaching for a bag of apples froze and suddenly remembered something urgent in the cereal aisle. I stood there with my hand on a Granny Smith watching her retreat. At the checkout counter, the teenage cashier glanced at my credit card, then up at my face. She leaned toward her coworker, a girl with purple hair and multiple piercings, and whispered something behind her hand. They both looked at me. The purple-haired girl's eyes went wide. I paid in cash instead. Sunday came and I went to Holy Trinity out of habit more than faith. The church had been Josephine's sanctuary. She'd volunteered in the nursery, helped organize the Easter egg hunt, played piano for the early service. After she got sick, the ladies' auxiliary had been relentless with their kindness meals delivered 3 times a week, offers to sit with her while I ran errands, prayers that felt like warm hands on my shoulders. I slipped into our usual pew halfway through the opening hymn. Behind me I heard Mrs. Caldwell and Mrs. Pierce, 2 women who'd brought chicken soup and sympathy cards just weeks ago, cut their conversation short mid-sentence. And heard it was gambling debts. No, I heard affair. Poor thing was so sick and he just... The words drifted forward in fragments, each one landing like a slap. I kept my eyes on the hymnal, my hands gripping the wooden pew until my knuckles went white. After the service, I didn't stay for coffee hour. Back home, I couldn't stand the silence. I pulled out my laptop, a machine I rarely used except to check email, and opened Facebook. Maybe I could find out where these stories were coming from. Maybe I could set the record straight. It took me 10 minutes to find the Charleston Community Group. 1,500 members. Posted 2 days ago. Does anyone know Clayton Merrick on King Street? Hearing some disturbing things about how he treated his wife during her illness? Sad when family takes advantage like that. 43 comments. Most of them from people I'd never met, repeating variations of the same rumors: gambling, infidelity, financial abuse. A few defended me, strangers, mostly saying we shouldn't judge without facts. But they were drowned out by the chorus of speculation. I scrolled down. Another post from a different anonymous account. Yeah, my friend is a nurse at MUSC. She said Josephine Merrick came in with bruises multiple times. Just saying. My vision blurred. I'd never laid a hand on Josephine. Not once. Not ever. The bruises had come from Alzheimer's, from falls, from the blood thinners her neurologist prescribed, from the cruel fragility that came with the disease. But who would believe me now? I refreshed the page. More comments appeared, each one adding another layer to a story that had nothing to do with the truth. Someone claimed they'd seen me at a casino in Myrtle Beach. Someone else said Josephine had confided in them about my controlling behavior. A third person, using a fake profile with no photo, said they'd heard I'd forged her signature on estate documents. None of it was true. All of it was spreading. I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of the laptop screen, casting shadows across Josephine's empty chair. Outside, Charleston carried on the carriage tours, the church bells, the tourists taking photos of rainbow-colored houses. Life moving forward while mine collapsed inward. I didn't understand where these stories were coming from, but someone wanted Charleston to turn its back on me. And it was working. A week after the emergency hearing, the utility company called. Mr. Merrick, this is Charleston Electric regarding your account at 214 King Street. Your service will be disconnected in 10 days without payment. I stared at the stack of bills on the kitchen table. Property tax notice on top, $8,400 due in 30 days. Water internet insurance beneath it. Each envelope a small crisis I couldn't solve. I'll take care of it, I told the woman, though I had no idea how. The next morning, I drove to Charleston First Bank on Broad Street, where Josephine and I had banked for 30 years. The teller's smile faded when I explained what I needed. I need to withdraw from our savings, enough to cover property taxes and utilities, she typed into her computer. Mr. Merrick, I'm so sorry. There's a court-ordered freeze on all accounts associated with your wife's estate. So what about my personal account? More typing. That one's accessible. Current balance is $12,463. 2 years of caregiving had drained nearly everything. I did the math: $8,400 for taxes, $600 for utilities, groceries, the mortgage payment coming due. The numbers didn't work. I drove down Meeting Street in a fog. A pawn shop sat wedged between a coffee house and an antique store, a place I'd passed 1,000 times without seeing. Now I pulled into the lot and sat in my truck for 5 minutes, trying to convince myself this wasn't happening. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed over rows of guitars and power tools. The man behind the counter looked up from his phone. Help you? I set down my grandfather's tool set in its wooden case. My college fishing gear. The watch Josephine had saved for months to buy me, engraved, 30 years still counting, love, Joe. The man examined each item with practiced efficiency. I can do $800 for the lot. $800. For my grandfather's legacy, and 30 years compressed into a piece of metal that would sit in a display case until some stranger bought it. Okay, he counted out the cash while I signed paperwork, my hand shaking. When I walked out, the watch was still on the counter, catching the fluorescent light. That evening, Beverly Pierce knocked on my door. I hadn't heard from most of Josephine's friends since the rumors started, but Beverly stood on my porch with a casserole dish and worry on her face. "I saw your truck at the pawn shop," she said. "Clay, what's going on?" I let her in because refusing would take more energy than I had. We sat at the kitchen table. The court froze the estate accounts, I explained. "I'm trying to keep up with bills until the next hearing." Beverly pulled out her checkbook. "How much do you need?" "Bev, no. Josephine was my best friend for 40 years. She would want me to help. You're living on a teacher's pension. I can't take your money." "Then let me loan it to you." I wanted to accept. But the look in her eyes, pity mixed with something that might have been doubt, made my stomach turn. Even Beverly, who'd known us since Lillian was born, couldn't quite hide the question. Was there any truth to the rumors? "I appreciate it," I said carefully. "But I need to handle this myself." She left the casserole and a promise to check on me. After she was gone, I sat in the growing darkness, too tired to turn on the lights. That's when I noticed the envelope on the hall table, large, official-looking, from a company I didn't recognize, Charleston Medical Providers, LLC. Inside was a billing statement. Final notice. Overdue balance, $82,000. For medical equipment delivered during patient care, Josephine Merrick. I scanned the itemized list: hospital bed, $12,000, oxygen concentrator, $8,000 wheelchair lift, $15,000 specialized mattress, $6,500. The list covered 2 pages equipment I didn't remember ordering, delivered on dates that made no sense. Some delivery dates were from last year during Josephine's decline, but others I checked the calendar by the refrigerator were from after she'd passed away. June Hartley had coordinated all of Josephine's medical supplies through reputable Medicare-approved vendors. I'd never heard of Charleston Medical Providers, LLC. The letterhead looked professional, corporate logo, invoice numbers, delivery dates. At the bottom in bold, legal notice. Property line established against the estate of Josephine Merrick pending payment. Failure to resolve within 30 days will result in foreclosure proceedings. Beverly knocked again. She'd forgotten her keys and found me staring at the bill. "Clay." She read over my shoulder. "What is this?" "It says I owe $82,000 for medical equipment." "Did you order this?" "No. June handled all the medical supplies. And these dates," I pointed to the calendar. "Some are after Joe passed away." Beverly's expression shifted from concern to something sharper. "This doesn't make sense." I looked at the professional letterhead, the detailed invoices, the legal threats, the fake medical bill, the rumors spreading through Charleston. The lawsuit filed days after Josephine's funeral. That's when I understood this wasn't a mistake. Someone was building a case against me, and they were very good at it. 4 weeks after the emergency hearing, I walked into the courthouse for what they called a preliminary hearing. Mid-April had brought warmth back to Charleston, the kind of spring morning that made tourists fill the sidewalks and locals sit on their porches with sweet tea. But inside the Charleston County Judicial Center, the air conditioning kept everything cold and sterile. I arrived with the same court-appointed attorney who'd barely managed to ask questions at the first hearing. He carried a thin folder thinner than Kingsley's leather briefcase, thinner than the stack of documents Lillian had arranged on her table like she was preparing for a corporate merger. She sat across the aisle from me, her dark suit pressed and perfect, sorting through papers with the mechanical efficiency of someone going through quarterly reports, not someone fighting her father over her mother's memory. Douglas Kingsley stood when Judge Ashford entered, his posture radiating the confidence of a man who'd never lost a case he cared about winning. "So, Your Honor," Kingsley began, his voice filling the courtroom, "the petitioner would like to call Dr. Simone Monroe as an expert witness." My stomach dropped. Dr. Monroe had been Josephine's neurologist. For 2 years, she'd examined my wife every month, checked her cognition, adjusted her medications, documented the slow erosion of the woman I loved. Josephine had trusted her. I'd trusted her. Now she walked through the courtroom doors in a white lab coat over business attire, a medical file clutched in her hands. Professional, clinical, a stranger wearing the face of someone who'd sat in our living room and explained Alzheimer's progression while Josephine slept upstairs. My attorney leaned close, his breath smelling like stale coffee. "Did you know about this?" I shook my head. No warning, no preparation, just another piece of the machine grinding forward without me. Dr. Monroe took the stand and raised her right hand, swearing to tell the truth. The bailiff stepped back. Kingsley approached with the measured pace of someone who already knew every answer. "Dr. Monroe, how long did you treat Josephine Merrick?" 2 years. From her Alzheimer's diagnosis in March 2022 until her passing in February 2024. Her voice was calm, detached, the same tone she'd used to explain medical terminology I barely understood. "Praenordintorians. In your professional medical opinion, was Mrs. Merrick capable of making sound decisions during the final 18 months of her life?" Dr. Monroe paused, glanced at the file in her lap, then looked directly at Judge Ashford. "No. She lacked the mental capacity to make legal or financial decisions." The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of the table, my knuckles going white. Kingsley continued, his tone sympathetic. "Can you elaborate for the court?" "Patients with advanced Alzheimer's experience progressive cognitive decline. Mrs. Merrick had reached a stage where she could no longer reliably recognize family members, retain new information, or express coherent wishes. Her condition made her extremely vulnerable to influence." I sat there frozen, remembering. 2 months before Josephine passed, on a rare afternoon when the fog lifted, she'd looked at me with clear, hazel eyes and said, "I love you, Clay. Don't let them take our home." She'd known who I was. She'd known what she was saying. She'd squeezed my hand with surprising strength, and for 5 perfect minutes, my wife had come back to me. But how do you prove a moment like that in a courtroom? "In your opinion," Kingsley asked, "could she have been manipulated or coerced during this period?" "Absolutely. Patients at this stage are extremely susceptible." My attorney stood for cross-examination, shuffling through notes he'd scribbled minutes before the hearing. "Dr. Monroe, isn't it true that Alzheimer's patients can have lucid moments? Brief periods of clarity?" "It's possible, yes." "So Mrs. Merrick could have had moments where she understood her circumstances." Dr. Monroe's expression didn't change. "Any such moments would have been fleeting and unreliable. They wouldn't constitute legal capacity." That was it. That was the entire cross-examination. My attorney sat down clearly out of his depth against a medical expert with decades of credentials. Judge Ashford reviewed her notes, glanced at the thin file my attorney had presented, mostly just copies of our marriage license and Josephine's death certificate, then looked at me with something that might have been sympathy. Now, based on Dr. Monroe's expert testimony, and in the absence of any written documentation of Mrs. Merrick's wishes during her illness, I find that any verbal statements she may have made are questionable." She made a notation. "Additionally, Mr. Merrick, I'm ordering a psychological evaluation. Not because I doubt your character, but because we need to ensure competency on both sides of this matter." A psychological evaluation. Like I was the one who couldn't be trusted. Like loving my wife and fighting for her memory made me mentally unstable. The gavel came down. I walked out of the courtroom in a daze. Behind me, I heard Lillian's heels clicking against the marble floor, heard Kingsley's congratulatory murmur. Neither of them looked my way. Outside, Charleston's spring sunshine felt wrong, too bright, too cheerful for a day when a doctor I'd trusted had just testified that my wife's final words to me were meaningless. I watched Dr. Monroe exit through the side door, climbing into a sleek sedan that cost more than I made in a year. She didn't glance back, didn't hesitate. I stood on the courthouse steps, thinking about June Hartley's daily logs, the careful documentation she'd kept of Josephine's good days and bad days, her lucid moments and confused ones. evidence that might have countered Dr. Monroe's clinical assessment. If only I'd known to bring them. Jo had talked to me. She'd known my name, known our address. She'd told me she loved me and meant it. But how do you prove a lucid moment to a doctor who only saw decline? 2 nights after the preliminary hearing, Curtis found me on the porch at 2 in the morning. I hadn't meant to stay out there so long. I just needed air, needed to escape the empty rooms inside 214 King Street, where every corner reminded me of Josephine. The photo album sat open on my lap, our wedding day. Lillian's childhood vacations to Folly Beach when life felt simple. A glass of whiskey sat untouched on the porch railing, condensation pooling around its base. I'd been thinking about a day 6 months before Josephine passed. She'd been in her wheelchair by the window watching cardinals at the bird feeder. Then, without warning, she'd turned to me with those clear hazel eyes and said, "Promise me, Clay. Don't let Lillian destroy what we built. I'm leaving everything to you. It's in writing. Proper writing. Just promise me." I'd promised. I'd held her hand and sworn I'd fight for what we'd created together. Now that promise felt impossible. A tear dropped onto the wedding photo, blurring Josephine's smile. I wiped it away, quickly ashamed, even though no one was watching. "You're losing Jo," I whispered to the darkness. I don't know how to fight people with money and lawyers and lies. Headlights swept across the driveway. Curtis's pickup truck pulled in the engine, cutting off with a familiar rumble. He climbed out, still wearing his security uniform, must have driven straight from his shift at the port. "Clay." He took the porch steps 2 at a time. "You turned off the porch light." I got worried. "I'm fine, Curtis." He sat down in Josephine's old rocking chair, the one that creaked in the same spot it had for 20 years. We'd been friends for a quarter century, he knew when I was lying. "You're not fine, and that's okay, but we need to talk." I closed the photo album, suddenly exhausted. "About what?" "About the fact that you're thinking of giving up. I can see it on you." "What's the point?" The words came out harsher than I meant. "They have a doctor saying Jo wasn't competent. I just have memories. Courts don't run on memories." "Nah, courts run on evidence." Curtis leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "And you need someone who knows how to find it. I already told you I can't afford. You need a real lawyer. Someone who knows how to fight. Someone who's not juggling 50 other cases." He pulled out his phone, scrolled through contacts. "I know somebody." I looked at him, at the detective's instinct still sharp in his eyes, even after 3 years of retirement. "Who?" "Malcolm Blackwell. Used to be a prosecutor. 15 years experience. Now he specializes in estate litigation. He's selective. Only takes cases he believes in." "Oh, Curtis, I appreciate it. But selective lawyers usually cost. He owes me a favor, a big one." Curtis was already dialing. "Let me call him." The next morning, I stood outside Malcolm Blackwell's office on Broad Street, 2nd floor, above a bookstore that smelled like old paper and coffee. The building was modest. No marble lobby, no receptionist behind a glass desk. Just a narrow staircase and a door with frosted glass, Malcolm Blackwell, attorney at law. Curtis knocked. A voice called, "Come in." Malcolm Blackwell sat behind a desk covered in organized chaos, legal pads, case files, a laptop surrounded by post-it notes. He was mid-40s, sharp-eyed behind reading glasses, dressed in a button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Not the polished armor Kingsley wore. This was a man who worked. He stood when we entered, shook my hand firmly. "Mr. Merrick, Curtis told me about your situation." "Sit." We sat. Malcolm pulled out the transcript Curtis had somehow obtained from the preliminary hearing, I didn't ask how, and read through it with the intensity of someone who'd spent years prosecuting criminals. This is not good," he said finally. "They have expert medical testimony. You have no documentation. Your court-appointed attorney did what he could with nothing." My chest tightened. So you're saying I'm saying you need ammunition, and we need to find it fast. He closed the transcript, studied me over his glasses. Tell me everything. Start with how you cared for your wife. So I did. I told him about the daily routine, bathing Josephine when she couldn't do it herself, feeding her when she forgot how to use a spoon, reading to her on the days when she didn't know my name but would still hold my hand. I told him about the medications, the sleepless nights, the moments when I'd cry in the bathroom so she wouldn't see. Malcolm took notes, asked questions, never rushed me. Financial transactions, he asked. I have receipts, boxes of them. Every penny I spent on Joe's care. Her lucid moments, too, they happened. Unpredictable but real. She'd talk about our life together, give instructions, tell me she loved me. I know what Dr. Monroe said, but I was there. Joe knew what she was saying. Who else was there? Who witnessed these moments? I paused. June Hartley. She was there every day. Malcolm's expression shifted, something like interest, maybe hope. Who's June Hartley? Josephine's caregiver. I hired her 2 years ago when Joe's Alzheimer's got worse. She's a former ICU nurse. Very professional. Very thorough. Malcolm leaned forward. Define thorough. When she kept records, logs of everything. Medications, meals, who visited Joe's good days and bad days. She said it was standard protocol. For the first time since I'd walked into his office, Malcolm smiled, not with amusement, but with the recognition of something important. Clay caregivers don't keep documentation that detailed unless they have a reason. A personal reason. He picked up his phone. I need to meet June. Today, if possible. I gave him June's number, watched him dial, heard him introduce himself with the confidence of someone who'd spent 15 years in courtrooms. He scheduled a meeting for that afternoon. When he hung up, he looked at me with something I hadn't seen in weeks: optimism. Your professional caregivers who document everything, they do it because they've seen families tear each other apart. They do it because they know what happens when there's no evidence. You think June has what we need. I think June might be holding your entire case. And if that's true, your daughter just made a very expensive mistake. I sat there, Curtis beside me, Malcolm already pulling out a legal pad to start strategizing. The weight that had been crushing my chest since the emergency hearing loosened slightly. For the first time since the funeral, I felt something other than grief and fear. I felt possibility. That same afternoon, Malcolm and I drove to June Hartley's house in Mount Pleasant. 20 minutes east of Charleston, the landscape shifted from historic downtown to quiet suburban streets. Malcolm drove, filling the silence with questions. How long had June worked for us? What was her daily routine? Had she ever expressed concerns about Lillian? I answered as best I could, but mostly I stared out the window, trying to manage the fragile hope in my chest. June's house sat on a corner lot, a single-story ranch with cream siding, a carefully maintained lawn, and wind chimes on the porch. Everything spoke of order and care. Malcolm studied it. Neat. Organized. Good sign. June opened the door before we reached the porch. 52 with kind eyes that carried weight, dressed casually but professionally. She'd been at Josephine's funeral but had kept her distance. I'd say, Mr. Merrick, Mr. Blackwell, come in. Inside her home reflected the same meticulous care she'd brought to Josephine's bedside. Through an open doorway, I could see a home office, filing cabinets labeled boxes, a desktop computer, corkboards with calendars. Malcolm noticed. Impressive system, Ms. Hartley. I've been a caregiver for 15 years. Organization isn't optional. She led us to the dining table where documents were already laid out. She'd known why we were coming. June presented her records with systematic precision. First, the daily care logs, leather-bound notebooks covering 2 full years, every single day documented. She opened one and read aloud. March 15th, 2023, Mrs. M. Lucid today, recognized daughter's name when asked, requested scrambled eggs for breakfast. Smiled at wedding photos, napped 2 to 4 p.m. Evening confusion, returned around 7. Next came medication schedules, spreadsheets with every dose, every time, pharmacy receipts attached. Then visitor logs. Malcolm leaned forward. How many times did Lillian visit? June flipped through pages. 4 times in 2 years. 4 visits. While I'd been there every single day. June continued, financial records, tax forms, payment receipts. Equipment logs with legitimate vendors and receipts. Nothing from Charleston Medical Providers, LLC, which I'd never heard of until you mentioned it. Malcolm took notes, then set down his pen. Miss Hartley, this is extraordinary. But I have to ask why. Why this level of detail? June's expression shifted, something painful flickering across her features. My mother had Alzheimer's 10 years ago. I cared for her for 3 years. She folded her hands. My brother accused me of stealing from her, of manipulating her. I didn't have proof, no documentation, just my word against his. The court believed him. I lost everything, my inheritance, Mom's house, even jewelry she'd promised me. She looked at me. I made a promise that day I would never let that happen to another family. I would never stand in a courtroom without evidence again. Malcolm's voice softened. I'm sorry that happened. It made me better at my job. With every family, I document everything. It protects them. It protects me. It protects the truth. Do you have video evidence? Malcolm asked. June nodded. Mrs. Merrick consented to security cameras during a lucid period. She requested them. She opened her laptop and pulled up a folder from 8 months ago. The video showed our living room. On screen, I watched myself helping Jo eat soup, carefully wiping her chin. My voice gentle, reading from her favorite book, while she stared at me with confused but trusting eyes. I love you, Maggie, I heard myself say. Clay. Josephine's voice weak but present. I know you. I hadn't remembered the cameras were there. It was just our life. Tears blurred my vision. Malcolm watched with professional focus, but swallowed hard. And this is powerful, he said quietly. This is real care. June pulled up another file. I also have footage of Mrs. Merrick during lucid moments. She asked me to record when her mind was clear. I think she wanted proof that she knew what she wanted. Can you testify to all of this? Malcolm asked. Absolutely. That's why I kept it. My voice cracked. June, I didn't know you'd lost your mother that way. I'm so sorry. Mr. Merrick, you were devoted. I watched you every day for 2 years. What your daughter is doing is wrong, and I won't let her get away with it. Malcolm returned to the visitor logs. 4 visits in 2 years. Let's look at these dates. June pulled out the page. I read over Malcolm's shoulder. The first visit was a month after the diagnosis, lasted only 30 minutes. The second came 6 months later, 45 minutes. And according to June's notes, Lillian had asked about finances. The third was a year after that, just 20 minutes. The fourth happened 10 days before Jo died, in the evening, 40 minutes. Malcolm tapped the last entry. Tell me about this final visit. June's expression hardened. Something happened. Mr. Merrick wasn't home. Miss Merrick tried to pressure her mother into signing something. Is that visit on camera? Yes. I need to see it. But first, these documents. Can you have them court-ready? June met his gaze without hesitation. Mr. Blackwell, I've had them court-ready since the day Mrs. Merrick passed away. I knew this was coming. I looked at Malcolm, then at June, feeling something shift. Malcolm's expression had changed, the careful neutrality giving way to something sharper. Whatever June was about to show us, it was going to matter. A lot. Leaving June's house that evening, I noticed the black SUV. It sat across the street from her driveway engine, off-tinted windows, dark against the fading twilight. Something about it made my stomach tighten. On that SUV, I said to Malcolm as we walked toward our cars. Has it been there the whole time? Malcolm followed my gaze. I don't know. Why? I've seen it before. Outside my house last week. I thought I was being paranoid. Malcolm's expression shifted, grew serious. Maybe you're not. We got into our separate vehicles. I pulled out of June's driveway, watching my rearview mirror. The SUV's headlights flicked on. It pulled away from the curb, maintaining distance but following. My heart rate picked up. This was real, not imagination. I tested it, turned down a side street that wasn't on my normal route home. The SUV followed. I pulled into a gas station, pretended to check my tire pressure. The SUV drove slowly past, then parked at the far end of the lot. I got back in my truck, took a different route home. Eventually, I lost sight of the SUV, or it let me go. Over the next 3 days, it appeared everywhere. Day 1. Outside 214 King Street in the morning, when I drove to the grocery store. I came out with bags of food, and there it was, idling 2 houses down. Day 2. Station 5's parking lot while I taught the EMT class. I spotted it through the training room window tucked in the corner near the exit. Day 3. Charleston First Bank's lot when I tried again to access funds. The SUV sat 3 rows back, same tinted windows, same stillness. I called the police non-emergency line. There's a vehicle that's been following me. The dispatcher's voice was professional but detached. Has anyone approached you or made direct threats? No, but... Without a direct threat or contact, there's not much we can do. We can increase patrols in your area. Frustrating, but predictable. I thanked her and hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat by the living room window watching. The SUV was parked across the street, same position, engine off. No one got out. Hours passed, 11 p.m., midnight, 1 a.m. The SUV remained. I finally dozed off in the armchair, exhausted. Morning light woke me. I walked to the window, rubbing my eyes. The SUV was gone. Brief relief washed over me. Maybe they'd given up. I went outside to grab the newspaper from the driveway. Then I saw my truck. All 4 tires were flat slashed with clean, deliberate cuts. I walked closer, my chest tightening. The garage door was spray-painted in bright red, "Drop it." They knew where I lived. They'd come onto my property in the middle of the night. I called 911. I need to report vandalism. 2 officers arrived 20 minutes later, took photos, filled out paperwork. The younger one crouched by the tires, examining the cuts. This is criminal mischief, Mr. Merrick. We'll investigate, but without witnesses or camera footage. This is connected to my lawsuit, I said. Someone's trying to intimidate me. The officer stood, his expression sympathetic, but limited. I understand. We'll increase patrols. If you see that SUV again, call immediately. Try to get the license plate. They left. I stood in my driveway, staring at the message on my garage door. I called Curtis. I'm on my way, he said without hesitation. 15 minutes later, Curtis pulled up. He must have been close. He took in the garage, the truck, his face hardening. This is witness intimidation, he said, his detective instincts kicking in. Someone wants you to drop the case. He pulled out his phone, started taking photos. I'm staying close, Clay, and I'm going to find out who's behind this. That afternoon, I found a letter in my mailbox. No stamp, hand-delivered. The envelope was plain white, no return address. Inside, a typed note. You're making a mistake. People will get hurt if they don't listen. Drop the lawsuit. This is your last friendly warning. Curtis read it, wearing gloves, treating it like evidence. We need to document this. Photos, reports, everything. He photographed the truck, the garage, the letter. Then he walked to the end of the block where the SUV had reappeared, partially hidden behind a delivery van. He managed to capture part of the license plate before it drove away. Curtis studied the photo on his phone. I still have contacts at Charleston PD. Let me make some calls. Curtis, what if it gets worse? He met my eyes, his voice firm. Then we deal with it. But don't back down. People who make threats like this, they're scared. That means Malcolm's on the right track. That night, I barely slept. Every car that passed, every sound outside my body stayed on high alert. I kept the lights off, watched the street through a gap in the curtains. The SUV didn't return. But the message on my garage door remained stark and threatening in the streetlight's glow. They wanted me afraid, and it was working. 6 a.m. The next morning, my phone rang. "Curtis, I found it. You need to see this now." I drove to his house near Hampton Park, a tidy one-story that bore the marks of a bachelor who kept everything in its place. Curtis sat at his dining table with his laptop, 2 mugs of coffee already poured. He looked like he'd been up all night. "Sit down," he said, sliding 1 mug toward me. I ran that partial plate through. Let's call them unofficial channels. Unofficial. I still have friends at Charleston PD. They owe me favors. He turned the laptop screen toward me. Vehicle registration information filled the display. The SUVs registered to Enterprise Rentals corporate account. Payment method credit card ending in... He scrolled down. I traced that card. It belongs to Sinclair Capital Management. What's Sinclair Capital Management? Curtis opened a company website, sleek design, professional photos, sparse details. Private investment firm, small operation, run by one person. He pointed to a headshot, a man in his mid-40s, expensive suit, confident smile. Lucien Sinclair. I studied the photo. Something about his expression, the way he looked at the camera like he owned whatever room he was in, made my stomach turn. "Who is he?" "Your daughter's fiancé." The words hit me like cold water. "Lillian's engaged." She never told me. Not even at the funeral. They've been together 2 years according to social media. He proposed last year. Curtis opened more screens, public profiles, court documents. "Lucian's in trouble, Clay. Big trouble. Look at this." He pulled up civil suits. Lawsuits from investors. His company lost $3 million in a failed deal. He's being sued by 4 different investors. More documents appeared. Bank records show liens against his business assets. Defaulted loans. This man is drowning financially. I processed the information slowly. So he needs money. Not just needs, desperately. Curtis opened another file. "Remember the fake creditor Charleston Medical Providers, LLC? The $82,000 bill for equipment I never ordered. Look at the business registration." He turned the screen again. Registration date 3 weeks before Josephine passed away. Business address. I leaned closer, reading the line Curtis was pointing to. The same building as Sinclair Capital Management. Same floor. He created that company. I said the pieces clicking together. Not just created. Look at the incorporation documents. Curtis pulled up another screen. Lucien Sinclair is listed as the registered agent. That's fraud. Calculated fraud. He set this up before Joe died. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of it settling over us. "We need to take this to Malcolm," Curtis said. An hour later, we sat in Malcolm's office. He'd agreed to meet on a Saturday morning, which told me he understood the urgency. He reviewed everything Curtis had found, taking detailed notes. "Curtis, how did you access some of this information?" Curtis chose his words carefully. "Through legal public record searches and some connections. I can't use illegally obtained evidence in court." "I know, but you can use it to know where to search legally." Malcolm's expression shifted, something like approval. "Smart." He spread the documents across his desk, organizing them into categories. "This changes everything. Lucien isn't just Lillian's fiancé, he's the architect. She wants your estate, he needs it. Together they built a conspiracy." Malcolm pulled out a legal pad, started drafting. "I'm filing a motion to dismiss the fake creditor's lien. I'll include the corporate records, those are public. The registration timeline looks suspicious. The business address links directly to Lucien. And the fact that no equipment was actually delivered can be proven through June's logs. I'll file this Monday morning, and I'm sending a copy to the district attorney's office. The DAY. Malcolm set down his pen. Because this isn't just a civil dispute anymore, Clay. What we're looking at is fraud. Possibly conspiracy to commit fraud. That's criminal. He looked at Curtis. Keep digging. Carefully? Legally? Curtis nodded. What about the threats? I asked. The vandalism, the letters, that's witness intimidation, also criminal. Malcolm turned to Curtis. Can you connect that SUV directly to Lucien? I'm working on it. We left Malcolm's office as the morning sun climbed higher over Charleston. Curtis walked beside me to the parking lot, both of us quiet. At my truck, Curtis turned to me. They're making mistakes now. Desperate people always do. I wanted to believe him, wanted to feel the confidence I heard in his voice. But desperate people also became dangerous. 3 days after Curtis identified the SUV, Malcolm called me to his office. My investigator found this, he said, holding up a thick stack of printed screenshots. I sat across from his desk while he spread the documents out like evidence at a crime scene. Remember those rumors, the social media posts? Malcolm tapped the papers. They weren't organic. He showed me printouts of Facebook posts, each one time-stamped and annotated. My investigator traced the IP addresses, different accounts, but they all originated from a single source initially, then spread through networks. The posts had appeared first in Charleston Community Group, Holy Trinity Church, Parish Charleston Firefighters Network. Places where I had roots. Places where my reputation mattered. Very professional work, Malcolm said. Targeted specifically at your communities. He pulled out the investigator's report. The posts had been strategically timed, appearing within hours of court filings. The language analysis showed professional reputation management vocabulary. Then my investigator found the payments. Malcolm slid a bank record across the desk. Wire transfer from Sinclair Capital Management. Recipient TRP Investigations, Consulting Services $15,000. TRP Investigations, run by Terry Ramsey. Malcolm opened the South Carolina Private Investigator Licensing Database on his laptop. Terry Ramsey, licensed PI Charleston. Background: former Charleston PD officer 2001 to 2015. Current specialty listed as reputation consulting. My investigator talked to some of Ramsey's former clients. He specializes in perception management, which is essentially reputation destruction. Malcolm showed me text messages obtained through legal discovery requests related to Lucien's business dealings. The messages were dated 3 weeks ago, right after the emergency hearing. Lucien to Terry: need reputation management on Clayton Merrick. Make it thorough. Terry's response: understood. Charleston's a small town. I know how to work it. More messages followed. Lucien: focus on the firefighter community. That's his base. Lucien: church ladies love to gossip. Plant seeds there. Lucien: make sure everyone knows he's unstable. Ramsey kept everything, Malcolm said. Screenshots of posts he made, schedules of when and where, copies of payments. Standard PI documentation, probably to protect himself legally. He showed me Ramsey's activity log, post in Charleston Community Facebook group. Hearing some disturbing things about Clayton Merrick. Anonymous tip sent to Charleston Post and Courier. Investigation into local elder abuse case. Comments in firefighter forums. Does anyone know what really happened with Merrick's wife? This is defamation, Malcolm said. Witness intimidation, coordinated harassment. I stared at the printouts, seeing my life dissected by someone paid to do it. Why would Ramsey keep such detailed records? Because he's a PI. Documentation protects him if things go wrong. And because Malcolm pulled up another document. He's desperate for money. My investigator found he owes people all over Charleston. Divorce settlement, gambling debts, back rent. Lucien paid cash. Curtis had been waiting in the lobby. Malcolm called him in. Terry Ramsey, Curtis said when Malcolm showed him the name. I know him. We both turned, and we were on the force together. He left in 2015. Not voluntarily. He took money from a defendant's family to lose evidence. Got caught. Curtis's expression hardened. Terry's not a bad person. He's just financially cornered. He'll do anything for money, including this. Curtis, can you talk to him? Malcolm asked. Curtis thought about it. Maybe, if I approach it right. Terry might flip if he thinks Lucien's going down anyway. Malcolm gathered the documents. I'm filing a supplemental brief showing coordinated defamation campaign. It proves motive and means. It shows Lucien actively working to destroy your credibility while trying to steal your estate. Will that help? It builds our case. Not just for civil court, for criminal prosecution. Curtis stood. I'll reach out to Terry, carefully. See if he's ready to cooperate. Malcolm looked at both of us. We're building a case. Not just for civil court, for criminal prosecution, too. That should have made me feel better. Instead, I found myself thinking about Lucien's text messages, the calculated way he'd targeted my communities, the money he'd spent to destroy my reputation. I wondered what Lucien would do when he realized we were closing in. 1 week after Malcolm's investigation, the intimidation tactics shifted. I was teaching the EMT certification class at Station 5 on a Tuesday afternoon, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy. 12 students sat in rows of folding chairs, aspiring firefighters and civilians working toward their emergency medical technician licenses. I stood at the whiteboard explaining proper chest compression depth for CPR when the door opened mid-sentence. A man walked in. He was in his 40s, powerfully built, in a way that suggested regular gym time, dressed in expensive casual wear, a polo shirt, and designer jeans. His eyes were cold, calculated. He didn't apologize for interrupting. Just walked straight down the center aisle and took a seat in the back row. Students glanced back then at me. Can I help you? I kept my voice professional. The man smiled slightly, nothing friendly about it. He shook his head, slowly, said nothing. Just stared at me. Are you here for the class? Registration is handled through. Still silent. Still watching. An awkward silence filled the room. Okay then. I turned back to the whiteboard, tried to continue. But I could feel his eyes on me. My train of thought derailed. What CPR compressions should be? I checked my notes material I knew by heart, but my brain had frozen. Should be. A young woman in the front row leaned forward. Mr. Merrick, are you okay? Fine, sorry, where was I? I continued teaching, but every few minutes I glanced at the man. He never looked away, barely blinked, just sat there, an oppressive presence that filled the room with tension. Even the students could feel. The class normally ran 2 hours. I cut it short at 90 minutes. Students filed out, talking quietly among themselves. I approached the man. I have to ask, who are you? He stood slowly, deliberately, and walked toward the door. As he passed me close enough that I could smell his cologne, he leaned in. You should listen when people give advice. He whispered, barely audible, a reference to the drop it message. Then he walked out. My hands shook. Chief Tucker came in moments later, having seen the man leave. Clay, who was that? I don't know. But I think they're escalating. Tucker's expression shifted to concern. This is about your lawsuit, isn't it? I nodded. Clay, maybe you should. I can't stop coming here, Eugene. This is my life. I can't let them take this too. That evening, I sat alone at my kitchen table, doors, locked windows, checked twice. Around me lay the evidence of my old life photos of Joe firefighter commendations, my father's tool set I'd bought back from the pawn shop with money Curtis loaned me. Memories flooded in unbidden. Joe in her wedding dress, laughing at something I'd said. Her face when we first saw 214 King Street, the way she'd squeezed my hand and whispered, "This one." The doctor's office when we got her diagnosis, Joe gripping my hand so hard I thought my bones would break. Good days when she was lucid smiling, saying, "I love you, Clay," and meaning it. The last day Joe in the hospital bed, one final weak squeeze of my hand before she slipped away. Tears ran down my face. Maybe I should just let it go. The house isn't worth this fear. Joe's gone. What am I even fighting for anymore? My phone rang. Curtis with timing that felt almost supernatural. "I'm coming over." "Curtis, you don't have to." "Eugene called me, told me about the man at the station. I'm coming." 15 minutes later, Curtis let himself in with the emergency key I'd given him. He found me at the kitchen table surrounded by photos and memories. He sat down. "Talk to me." "I'm tired, Curtis. I'm 62 years old. I've been fighting for 2 months. My wife's dead. My daughter hates me. Half of Charleston thinks I'm a monster. And now someone's threatening me in public." My voice cracked. "Maybe I don't have the strength for this anymore." Curtis's expression was firm but kind. "That's exactly what they want. You giving up. And you know what that means. Their plan is working. They're scared. Scared people sent that man to my class, Curtis. Scared people slashed my tires. What if next time, then I'll be here. You're not alone in this." Curtis pulled out his phone, showed me a photo, the man climbing into the black SUV outside Station 5. Curtis had taken it from his own vehicle. I followed him. Got his face, got the vehicle, and this time, he zoomed in. Full license plate. Malcolm's investigator is running it now. By morning, we'll know who he is. Curtis leaned forward. "Clay, that man showing up in person. That's not confidence. That's desperation. Malcolm's investigation is working. We're getting close to something, and they know it." Curtis made coffee, sat with me past midnight. At some point he said, "So, remember the warehouse fire in 2012 on 3rd Street? I nodded. I'd been there. "You went in to get that kid when everyone said the structure wasn't safe. You didn't quit then." "That was different. That was my job. This is your life. Your home. Joe's memory. This is bigger than a job." Curtis left around 1 a.m., making me promise to call if anything happened. I sat alone, looking at Joe's photo, her wedding day smile, the joy in her eyes. I thought about Curtis's words, about Joe's letter, about Lillian's face in that courtroom so certain she'd win. And I realized something. I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting to prove those 2 years of loving care mattered, that Joe's wishes mattered, that I mattered. At 2:47 in the morning, my phone rang. "Curtis, someone's at June's house. I'm on my way. Meet me there." I jerked awake, heart hammering through on clothes, and drove toward Mount Pleasant. The roads were empty at 3 a.m., streetlights casting orange pools on dark asphalt. I made the drive in 15 minutes. As I drove, I remembered earlier that day, Malcolm had warned June. "They know about your records," Malcolm had said in his office. "There's a possibility they'll try something." June had looked at him calmly. "What should I do?" "Curtis is installing additional security, and I'd feel better if you stayed somewhere else for a few nights." June had agreed gone to stay at Beverly Pierce's house. Now I turned onto June's street and saw police cruisers' lights flashing Curtis's truck parked at an angle. I pulled over and ran toward the house. Curtis stood outside talking to officers. He saw me coming. "They got him." "Got who?" Curtis's expression held grim satisfaction. "Lucien Sinclair." Inside June's house, the damage was obvious. A rear window was shattered glass scattered across the floor. June's home office had been ransacked. Filing cabinet drawers hung open, papers strewn everywhere, her computer's cables ripped out. Detective Jonathan Hayes, Charleston PD, was photographing the scene. He was in his 40s, professional, methodical. He looked up when I entered. "Mr. Merrick, you're the plaintiff in the estate case." Yes, this is connected. We know. Officer Porter briefed us. In the living room sat a man in handcuffs, an officer standing guard. I saw him for the first time. Lucian Sinclair. He was in his early 40s, normally polished and confident based on photos I'd seen online. Now he looked disheveled, expensive clothes, wrinkled hands, dirty from climbing through windows, a cut on his forearm from broken glass. Lucian looked up, saw me, and his expression shifted. Anger, fear, something desperate flickered across his features. "That's him," I asked Curtis. "Lillian's fiancé." Detective Hayes joined us. Mr. Sinclair was apprehended at 2:38 a.m., attempting to remove computer hard drives from the scene. He gestured to a bag near Lucian's feet containing June's backup drives. Breaking and entering, attempted theft, and given the ongoing litigation, potential evidence tampering. "How did you catch him?" Curtis smiled slightly. "I installed new security yesterday. Wireless cloud connected. Motion sensors triggered cameras, recorded silent alarms sent to my phone. I was here in 8 minutes. Police arrived 12 minutes after that." He showed me his tablet. Security footage played on the screen. Lucian approached the house, checking windows. Broke the rear window with a rock. Climbed inside clumsily, not a professional. Went straight to the home office. Searched frantically, clearly knowing what he wanted. Unplugged hard drives, stuffed them in a bag. Then Curtis entered through the front door. He had a key and shouted, "Charleston PD is on the way. Stay where you are." Lucian froze, caught completely. Mr. Sinclair." Detective Hayes said, "Do you have anything to say?" Lucian's legal instincts kicked in despite his situation. "I want my attorney." "That's your right. But you were recorded on camera inside someone else's home holding their property." Hayes turned to Curtis. "Officer Porter, you said Ms. Hartley is staying elsewhere." "Correct. I'll contact her. She'll need to give a statement." "Mr. Sinclair, please stand up." An officer helped Lucian to his feet and led him toward the door. As he passed me, Lucian stopped. "This isn't over," he whispered, vicious. I met his eyes, surprising myself with my calmness. "Yes, it is. It's over." They took him to the patrol car. Detective Hayes approached me. "Mr. Merrick, we'll need your statement too. And contact information for Mr. Blackwell, the district attorney, will want to coordinate." I gave him Malcolm's information. Mr. Sinclair's phone was seized during arrest. With permission or a search warrant, that phone could illuminate quite a bit. Curtis and I watched the patrol car drive away, red and blue lights fading into the pre-dawn darkness. The sun was starting to rise, painting the sky pale orange. Curtis checked his phone. "Malcolm just texted. He's on his way." "Curtis, how did you know to watch June's house?" I didn't know for sure. But I know how desperate people think. They're running out of moves. June's evidence is the biggest threat to them. It was logical. "Thank you for being paranoid." Curtis smiled. 25 years as a cop. Paranoia kept me alive. Malcolm arrived 15 minutes later, looking like he'd dressed while driving. He spoke with Detective Hayes, got the details, then joined Curtis and me. "The DA is going to want this case. Badly. Breaking and entering evidence, tampering in an active lawsuit. Lucian's looking at felony charges. And his phone," Malcolm continued. "Curtis, tell me there's a way to—" Didn't already asked. "Hayes is getting a search warrant. With circumstances like this, a judge will sign it this morning." Malcolm looked at me. "This changes everything. Lucian's arrest gives us leverage. And his phone—" He paused. "Phones don't lie. They keep everything." I looked at June's house crime scene tape being strung up, sunrise painting the sky gold and pink. I thought about Lucian in that patrol car, desperate enough to break into someone's home. Malcolm was right. Desperate people make mistakes. And Lucian had just made a big one. But I couldn't shake the feeling, what would Lillian do when she found out? The next morning, Malcolm and I met Dr. Monroe at a coffee shop on King Street, somewhere public neutral. She was already seated at a corner table when we arrived. I barely recognized her. Doctor. Monroe looked like she hadn't slept. No makeup, hair pulled back hastily, expensive clothes, wrinkled hands trembling as she gripped her coffee cup. Malcolm set his briefcase down. Dr. Monroe, thank you for meeting us. You understand I'm recording this? She nodded. Yes. I want everything documented. I need it documented. This is Malcolm Blackwell, attorney for Clayton Merrick, meeting with Dr. Simone Monroe on May 28, 2024, at... He continued with the full legal recording preamble. I sat across from the woman who'd destroyed my case, feeling conflicted, angry, but also seeing the desperation in her eyes. I couldn't stay silent. Why did you lie about my wife? Dr. Monroe's face crumpled. Tears started falling. I'm so sorry. I was drowning. She took a shaky breath. I'm $200,000 in debt. Student loans from medical school, divorce settlement, alimony. I have 2 kids in college. I was working 18-hour days and still falling behind. Malcolm leaned forward. When did Lillian Merrick approach you? 3 weeks before the preliminary hearing. She came to my office for a private consultation. Dr. Monroe described the meeting Lillian professional calm, making it sound like a business arrangement. She offered $50,000 upfront, $50,000 after successful testimony, plus a long-term consulting contract with her firm. Dr. Monroe's voice dropped. All I had to do was testify that Josephine Merrick was completely incapacitated during the final 18 months of her life, that any wishes she expressed were medically meaningless. Did you believe that was medically accurate? Malcolm asked. Dr. Monroe shook her head. No. Josephine had moderate to advanced Alzheimer's, yes, but she had lucid periods, sometimes days, sometimes just hours, but real moments of clarity where she could understand, communicate, and make decisions. She looked directly at me. I falsified my testimony. I committed perjury. I made your memories of your wife look like delusions. I'm truly sorry. My throat tightened. You took away the last thing I had. The moments when Joe recognized me when she told me she loved me. You made the judge think I imagined them. I know. Dr. Monroe was crying openly now. I betrayed my oath, betrayed her memory, betrayed you. Malcolm's voice turned cold, clinical. Why are you coming forward now? Dr. Monroe pulled out her phone, showed Malcolm an email. Malcolm read it aloud for me. Email from Lillian to Douglas Kingsley, dated May 20th. Contingency plan. If Monroe's testimony gets challenged, accuse her of falsifying medical records to help Clayton. Position us as victims in her fraud. We paid her for legitimate consulting, but she went rogue. Legal liability falls on her. Dr. Monroe's voice hardened through her tears. I was never going to get that second $50,000. She planned to destroy me the moment I became a liability. I was disposable to her. She used me, planned to eliminate me, and never thought twice. What are you providing us? Malcolm asked. Dr. Monroe slid a large envelope across the table. Everything. Wire transfer records with bank statements. Screenshots of text exchanges with Lillian. Josephine Merrick's original unaltered medical records showing documentation of lucid periods. A typed signed confession. Agreement to testify truthfully. Malcolm reviewed the documents carefully. This is comprehensive. Why go this far? Dr. Monroe looked at me. Because you were right, Mr. Merrick. I took away the last precious thing you had. Your memories of your wife. I can't give them back. But I can confirm they were real. She opened the medical file, pointed to specific entries. Josephine Merrick had lucid periods. I documented them. I read the clinical notes through tears. March 12, 2023. Patient lucid, oriented to person and place, engaged in conversation about family, expressed clear wishes regarding care. April 8, 2023. Alert and oriented, recognized husband by name, discussed preferences for end-of-life care. September 21st, 2023. Lucid episode lasting approximately 6 hours. Patient communicated, clearly laughed at shared memories. She knew who you were, Mr. Merrick. She loved you. And in those clear moments, she was fully capable of expressing her wishes. The clinical documentation proof that Joe's love was real, that our conversations mattered. Dr. Monroe, Malcolm said, you understand that by doing this, you're facing medical board review, potential license suspension, and possible criminal charges for perjury. Yes. And you're willing to testify to all of this in court under oath, accurately this time. Yes, I'll testify to everything. What Lillian paid me, what she told me to say, and what the truth actually was. Dr. Monroe's voice steadied. I can't undo what I did, but I can stop it from succeeding. Malcolm stood. I'll need to coordinate with the district attorney's office. Your cooperation will be noted. I don't care about leniency. I care about being able to look at myself in the mirror. We left the coffee shop, walked to Malcolm's car. Clay, Dr. Monroe just handed us everything. The bribery is proven. The perjury is admitted. Her original records vindicate your memories. With her testimony, Lillian's case collapses. How soon can we get to court? I'll file for an emergency hearing. With criminal charges against Lucien and the investigation into Lillian, the judge will grant it. I looked up at the sky, late May in Charleston, nearly summer. 2 weeks. I can endure 2 more weeks. 3 weeks after Dr. Monroe's confession, I walked into Charleston County Courthouse for the final hearing. The press was calling it the estate case of the year. The morning was warm, mid-June, humidity settling over Charleston like a blanket. Outside the courthouse, camera crews clustered near the entrance, reporters checking microphones, photographers positioning themselves for the shot. A reporter called out as I approached. Mr. Merrick, any comment on your daughter's arrest? I kept walking, Malcolm beside me. No comment. Beverly Pierce met me at the entrance, squeezed my hand. Half of Charleston is here, Clay. They want to see justice done. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Every seat filled, people standing along the back wall. I recognized faces: Chief Tucker from Station 5, colleagues from my EMT classes, members from Holy Trinity Church, neighbors from King Street. Lillian sat at the defendant's table with Douglas Kingsley arranging documents. She wore an expensive navy suit, her posture composed, but I noticed her knuckles white as she gripped her pen. She stared straight ahead, wouldn't look at me. We hadn't spoken since before the funeral. Lucian's chair sat empty. He was in jail awaiting his separate criminal trial. When all rise, Judge Miriam Ashford entered, her black robe swishing as she took the bench. Everyone stood. Please be seated. We're here for the final hearing in the matter of the estate of Josephine Merrick. Mr. Kingsley, your opening statement. Douglas Kingsley stood less confident than at the emergency hearing. He knew what evidence was coming. Your Honor, this case concerns a husband who, while well-intentioned, took advantage of his wife during her incapacity. Large financial transactions over $280,000 require explanation. Undue influence during a vulnerable period. My client acted out of concern for her mother's estate. He referenced Dr. Monroe's preliminary testimony, not knowing she'd flipped. His opening painted Clayton as someone who'd exploited circumstances, hitting procedural points, but lacking conviction. When he sat down, the courtroom felt unmoved. Malcolm stood. Your Honor, this case is about greed disguised as concern. His voice filled the courtroom, clear and confident. The evidence will show that Lillian Merrick and her fiancé, Lucian Sinclair, orchestrated an elaborate fraud. They paid a doctor to commit perjury. They hired private investigators to destroy Mr. Merrick's reputation. They created a fake company to file fraudulent liens. They intimidated witnesses. And they did all of it for one reason: money. Whispers rippled through the courtroom. Something flickered across Lillian's face: fear, anger. Judge Ashford, order. Malcolm continued. Most importantly, Your Honor, You'll hear from Josephine Merrick herself, not through disputed testimony, but through video footage taken during her lucid periods. Through meticulous care logs kept by a professional caregiver, and through her own handwritten will. He turned, pointed at Lillian. Her daughter wants you to believe Josephine wasn't competent. The evidence will show she was clear-minded enough to know exactly what her daughter was capable of, and she protected herself from it. The courtroom went silent. Mr. Blackwell, call your first witness. The estate calls Mr. Frederick Caldwell, senior account manager at Charleston First Bank. Mr. Caldwell was in his 60s, conservative suit, professional demeanor. He took the oath and sat in the witness box. Malcolm methodically walked through the financial evidence. Mr. Caldwell, you reviewed the account activity for Clayton and Josephine Merrick. Yes. I prepared a comprehensive report. What did you find regarding the $280,000 in transfers? Caldwell referenced his documents. The transfers fell into 5 categories: professional medical care, experimental treatment costs, home modifications for medical purposes, legal fees for estate planning, and respite care services. Were these transfers unusual for a family managing advanced Alzheimer's care? No. They're consistent with comprehensive in-home care. Many families spend equivalent amounts to keep loved ones home rather than in facilities. 1, 2. Did you find any transfers that appeared personal, suspicious, or unrelated to Mrs. Merrick's care? No. Every transfer had corresponding documentation, receipts, invoices, care contracts. Kingsley's cross-examination focused on oversight, whether Clayton had sole access. Mr. Merrick had legal authority as spouse, but every expense corresponded with documented medical needs. Kingsley had no further questions. He couldn't challenge the evidence. The estate calls June Hartley. The courtroom door opened. June walked in, wearing business attire, a modest dress professional carrying a thick leather binder. I watched her approach the witness stand, the woman who'd saved my case. She took the oath, sat down, calm and confident. Mrs. Hartley, what was your role in Josephine Merrick's care? June's voice was clear, professional. I was her full-time caregiver for 2 years, from March 2022 until she passed in February 2024. And did you document that care? June opened the binder. Yes, every single day, every detail. Malcolm approached, took the binder, held it up, so the entire courtroom could see its thickness. Your Honor, this represents 2 years of daily logs. With the court's permission, I'd like Ms. Hartley to explain what's contained inside. June's testimony lasted all afternoon. By the end, even Douglas Kingsley had stopped objecting. Malcolm walked through the documents systematically, June, answering each question with professional precision. What, Ms. Hartley, you've shown the court your care logs. Can you describe a typical day caring for Mrs. Merrick? June's response was detailed, methodical. Morning routine medications at 7 a.m., breakfast preferences, mood assessment. Clayton's involvement. Mr. Merrick was present every morning. He helped with bathing, assisted with meals, stayed during difficult episodes. Afternoons, physical therapy, exercises, reading time, rest periods. Evenings, dinner, medications, bedtime preparation. Nights, June or Clayton, nearby baby monitor system in place. So Mr. Merrick never left her alone on bad days. He used all his vacation time, rearranged his teaching schedule, slept in a chair beside her bed when she felt anxious. I remembered those nights, Joe's hand in mine. Mrs. Hartley, your visitor logs. How many times did Lillian Merrick visit her mother? June consulted the log. She already knew the answer. 4 times over 2 years. An audible reaction rippled through the courtroom. Gasps, whispers. Judge Ashford, order please. 4 times in 24 months. Correct. Can you describe those visits? June referenced her notes, dates, times, durations. Visit 1, April 2022. 30 minutes, awkward, abrupt departure. Visit 2, October 2022. 45 minutes asked about financial accounts seemed uncomfortable with mother's condition. Visit 3 August 2023. 20 minutes brief check-in work, phone call interrupted. Visit 4 February 2024, 10 days before Josephine died. 40 minutes evening, Mr. Merrick not home. Let's discuss that fourth visit. What happened? June's expression hardened. Ms. Merrick arrived around 7 p.m. Mrs. Merrick was in her wheelchair in the living room, weak but alert. Ms. Merrick approached with papers. Kingsley stood. Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay. Miss Hartley witnessed events. She can testify to what she observed. Objection overruled. Continue. Ms. Merrick tried to pressure her mother into signing documents. Mrs. Merrick was confused, kept asking for Clayton. Ms. Merrick became frustrated. Her voice got louder. Mrs. Merrick started crying. I clenched my jaw. Joe's final days had been hard enough without this. Did you document this? Yes, in my log, and it was captured on security camera. Your Honor, I'd like to play video evidence. Proceed. The lights dimmed. A screen was wheeled into the center of the courtroom. Malcolm played footage chronologically. Clip 1. Clayton's Care 3-minute compilation. Clayton helping Joe eat patient and gentle, wiping her chin. Clayton reading to her from her favorite book. She didn't respond, but he continued. Clayton holding her hand, singing softly an old song from their wedding. Joe confused but comforted. Clayton, I'm here, Maggie. Always here. The courtroom went silent. Several people were crying. I had tears on my face. I'd forgotten cameras captured these private moments. Beverly in the gallery wiped her eyes. Clip 2. Lillian's visit. February 14th, 2024. Lillian entered, kissed Joe's cheek perfunctorily. Pulled a chair close, removed papers from her bag. Mom, we need to talk about paperwork. Joe, weak and confused. Papers. Yes. This will make things easier later. Just sign here. I don't... Where's Clayton? Lillian's voice rose, frustration bleeding through. Mom, I'm trying to help sign it. Joe recoiled, crying. No. I want Clayton. Lillian stood angry. You're being difficult. I'm trying to protect your estate. Joe through tears. You never come. You never. Lillian grabbed the papers, stormed out. The door slammed. Stunned silence filled the courtroom. I watched Lillian's face. She stared at her hands, wouldn't look at the screen. Clip 3. Lillian alone, continuation. Lillian thinking herself alone. June was in the kitchen, went to Joe's desk in the corner. Opened drawers searching. Found a document, pulled it out. The first page visible on camera, last will and testament. Lillian read it. Her expression changed, anger. Determination. She folded the document, put it in her purse, and left. Malcolm paused the video. Your Honor, Ms. Merrick took and destroyed her mother's will. He produced a document. Fortunately, Mrs. Merrick made a backup copy hidden in the family Bible. The will dated 6 months before Joe died, notarized, witnessed. Malcolm read a key passage. I leave my entire estate to my beloved husband, Clayton Merrick. He deserves it through devotion, love, and sacrifice. My daughter has achieved her own success and needs nothing from me. Lillian closed her eyes, face pale. Clip 4. Josephine's lucid moment. October 2023. 4 months before death. Joe lucid, sitting upright, eyes bright, completely different from previous clips. June beside her. Mrs. Merrick, you asked me to record this. Joe, voice weak but clear. Yes. I need to say this while I can. Joe spoke directly to camera. Everything to Clayton. The house, the money, everything. He's been here. Every day. Through all of it. Tears in her eyes. Lillian. My daughter. She only calls when she needs something. She doesn't love me. She loves what I have. Clayton is my heart, my life. He deserves every bit of this. Don't let Lillian take it. To June, you'll remember, you'll tell them. June in the video. I promise Mrs. Merrick. I'll remember. The video ended. Complete silence. Many people crying. Judge Ashford removed her glasses, wiped her eyes. I was overwhelmed hearing Joe's voice again, her words. Lillian sat motionless, face buried in her hands, shoulders trembling slightly. Judge Ashford's voice was thick. Mr. Kingsley, were you aware any of this existed? Kingsley stood visibly shaken. No, Your Honor. I wasn't informed about security footage or lucid moment recordings. He looked at Lillian, the look of a lawyer realizing his client had lied to him. Malcolm, Your Honor. I have one more witness. She wasn't on the original witness list, but she contacted me requesting to testify. To who? Dr. Simone Monroe. Lillian's head snapped up, eyes wide. I saw fear. Kingsley stood quickly. Objection. Dr. Monroe testified at the preliminary hearing for the plaintiff. The judge raised her hand, cutting him off mid-sentence. Dr. Simone Monroe stepped through the courtroom doors. She wore a crisp white blouse beneath a dark blazer, carried a leather portfolio, and walked with the measured stride of someone who'd made a difficult decision and intended to see it through. Her eyes found mine briefly as she approached the witness stand, and I saw something I hadn't expected: regret mixed with determination. Judge Ashford gestured to the bailiff. Please swear in the witness? Monroe raised her right hand, her voice steady as she took the oath. I noticed her fingers weren't shaking, though they gripped the portfolio tightly enough that her knuckles had gone white. Malcolm stood buttoning his jacket. Dr. Monroe, you testified at the preliminary hearing in this case approximately 7 weeks ago, is that correct? Yes. And at that hearing you stated under oath that Josephine Merrick was completely incapacitated during the final 18 months of her life, unable to make legal or financial decisions. Do you stand by that testimony? The courtroom went absolutely silent. Even the court reporter's fingers stilled above the keys. Monroe's shoulders rose and fell with a deep breath. No, that testimony was not truthful. A murmur rippled through the gallery. Judge Ashford's gavel came down once sharp and decisive. Order! Kingsley shot to his feet. Your Honor, I object. On what grounds, counselor? The judge's tone carried an edge I hadn't heard before. This witness is... I wasn't informed that Dr. Monroe would be recanting her previous testimony. The defense hasn't had adequate time to... Mr. Kingsley, sit down. Judge Ashford leaned forward. Dr. Monroe has been sworn. She will testify. You'll have your opportunity to cross-examine. Continue, Mr. Blackwell. Malcolm approached the witness stand, holding a manila folder. Dr. Monroe, why did you provide false testimony at the preliminary hearing? She opened her portfolio with deliberate care, removing a stack of documents. I was offered $50,000, $25,000 before the hearing, $25,000 after, to testify that Mrs. Merrick lacked capacity throughout the period in question. And who made this offer? Lillian Merrick. I heard a sharp intake of breath behind me. Lillian's chair scraped against the floor as she leaned toward Kingsley, whispering urgently. Malcolm accepted the documents Monroe handed him, holding up the first page for the judge to see. Your Honor, these are bank statements showing 2 wire transfers from an account registered to Lillian Merrick to Dr. Monroe's personal account, March 12th and April 18th, 2024, $25,000 each. Judge Ashford examined the statements through her reading glasses. Admitted into evidence. Continue. Dr. Monroe, can you explain why you agreed to provide false testimony on Mindsters? Her voice remained steady, but I heard the weight behind it. I'm 52 years old. I've been divorced for 3 years. I owe approximately $200,000 in student loans and legal fees from the divorce. I have 2 children in college. The financial pressure was... she paused, choosing her words carefully. It felt insurmountable. When Ms. Merrick approached me with her offer, I convinced myself that what I was saying wasn't entirely false, that I was simply emphasizing certain aspects of Mrs. Merrick's condition. But that wasn't accurate, was it? No. Monroe pulled more documents from her portfolio. These are my original clinical notes from treating Josephine Merrick. They show a patient with Alzheimer's disease, yes, but one who experienced periods of lucidity, sometimes lasting hours, occasionally a full day. During these periods, she was oriented to person, place, and time. She could articulate her wishes clearly. She recognized family members and could make reasoned decisions. Malcolm took the notes, flipping through several pages. These notes contradict your testimony at the preliminary hearing. Completely. And Ms. Merrick instructed you to misrepresent your clinical findings. Yes. She told me the estate was large, approximately $3.2 million, and that she deserved it because her father had... Monroe stopped, glancing toward Lillian. She said he'd never been there for her mother, that he didn't deserve anything he'd been given. I felt Beverly's hand find mine beneath the table, squeezing gently. Malcolm returned to his table, exchanging the medical notes for another folder. Dr. Monroe, did you have any communication with Miss Merrick after the preliminary hearing? Yes. Multiple emails and text messages. And what was the nature of these communications? Monroe's professional composure cracked slightly. She was concerned about the investigation into Lucien Sinclair. She suggested that if questions arose about my testimony, I should claim I'd been coerced, that Mr. Sinclair had threatened me, not her. She said she would deny any involvement, and that I'd be left to face perjury charges alone. Your Honor, I have those emails and text messages here. Malcolm held up printed copies. Dr. Monroe forwarded them to our office 3 days ago. They show a clear pattern of Ms. Merrick attempting to distance herself from the witness, tampering while simultaneously maintaining control. Judge Ashford accepted the documents, reading through them with an expression that grew increasingly stern. When she finished, she removed her glasses and looked directly at Lillian. Bailiff. The uniformed officer moved toward the defendant's table. Lillian's face had gone pale, her eyes darting between Kingsley and the approaching bailiff. Your Honor. Kingsley stood, his voice lacking its earlier confidence. I would like to request a recess to consult with my client. Our request denied. The judge's tone was ice. Lillian Merrick, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, witness tampering, and perjury. Bailiff, take her into custody. The courtroom erupted. I watched as the bailiff moved behind Lillian's chair, heard the metallic click of handcuffs, saw Kingsley step back with his hands raised in a gesture that said he wanted no part of whatever came next. Malcolm leaned close to my ear. It's over, Clayton. You won. But it didn't feel like winning. I watched my daughter, my only child, being led from the courtroom in handcuffs, her head down, refusing to look at anyone. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I felt hollow. Judge Ashford's gavel rang out 3 times. Order, this court will come to order. The noise subsided gradually. The judge looked at Malcolm, then at me, her expression softening almost imperceptibly. Mr. Merrick, in light of Dr. Monroe's testimony and the documentary evidence presented, this court finds that the petition to transfer assets filed by Monsieur Lillian Merrick was fraudulent in nature and intent. All asset freezes are hereby lifted. The estate of Josephine Merrick will be distributed according to her last will and testament, as authenticated by witness testimony and video evidence. The fraudulent lien placed by Charleston Medical Providers, LLC, is vacated and expunged from the record. She paused, glancing down at her notes. Furthermore, this court will be referring charges of perjury, witness, tampering, fraud, and conspiracy to the District Attorney's Office for Criminal Prosecution. Mr. Blackwell, you'll coordinate with the DA's office regarding Mr. Lucien Sinclair's cooperation. Yes, Your Honor, Mr. Sinclair has provided a full statement detailing his role in creating Charleston Medical Providers LLC, hiring Terry Ramsey to conduct the social media defamation campaign, and arranging for Anthony Griffin and Dustin Hunt to intimidate witnesses. He's confirmed that Ms. Merrick was aware of and approved these actions with the shared goal of obtaining the $3.2 million estate to pay his business debts and divide the remainder. The judge made a note. Very well. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down one final time. For a moment, I couldn't move. 2 years of caring for Joe. 2 months of grief. 6 weeks of fighting to prove that love and devotion weren't crimes. And it was finished. The gallery erupted in applause. Chief Tucker, the EMT students, Mrs. Caldwell from church neighbors from King Street I'd known for decades. Beverly hugged me, tears streaming down her face. June squeezed my shoulder as she passed, heading back to collect her binder of evidence that would never need to be opened in another courtroom. Malcolm gathered his files, his expression one of quiet satisfaction. Clayton, I'll get the paperwork filed tomorrow. Your accounts will be unfrozen within 48 hours. The house, the savings, the open book. Everything Joe left you, it's yours. I nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in my throat. Curtis appeared at my elbow, grinning broader than I'd seen in weeks. Told you it would work out, brother. You did. I managed a small smile. Thank you. For everything. That's what brothers are for. He clasped my shoulder. Joe would be proud of you. Fighting for her for what she wanted. For the truth. That did it. The tears I'd been holding back for 6 weeks finally came. Beverly and Curtis stayed close, shielding me from the lingering reporters outside, guiding me through the courthouse doors and into the bright June afternoon. The sun felt warmer than it had in months. 3 months after the trial, I sat on the porch at 214 King Street and watched the Charleston sun set over the harbor. September had arrived with its promise of autumn still warm, but with evenings that whispered of cooler days ahead. The magnolia tree Joe and I planted 38 years ago rustled softly in the breeze. The estate had been settled. $3.2 million. I kept the house this place held every memory that mattered. The open book I sold for $220,000 to a young couple who promised to honor Joe's vision. That money, along with $500,000 from the estate, established the Josephine Hayes Caregivers Fund. June Hartley serves as director. Malcolm handles the legal work. In 3 months, we've awarded grants to 12 Charleston families, funding for in-home caregivers, respite programs, support groups. Everything I wished had existed when Joe and I needed it most. The sentences came down 6 weeks ago. Lillian received 3 years in federal prison for bribery conspiracy to commit fraud and witness intimidation. Lucian got 5 years reduced from 8 for cooperating. Dr. Monroe lost her medical license for 2 years and received probation with community service. Terry Ramsey, Anthony Griffin, and Dustin Hunt all got probation and fines. Kingsley faced no charges. He'd been deceived by his own client. I visited Lillian twice at the federal facility. The first time she cried for 20 of our 30 minutes, barely able to look at me through the glass partition. The second visit last week, she finally spoke. I don't expect forgiveness, Dad. I became someone I don't even recognize. I'm sorry. I'd thought about my response for weeks. You're still my daughter. That doesn't change. But trust takes time. Maybe years. Maybe never. I don't know yet. Life had found new rhythms. Twice weekly, I volunteer at the Charleston Memory Care Center, sitting with Alzheimer's patients who have no family nearby. I read to them, hold their hands. Do for others what I did for Joe. Once a month, I teach Understanding Alzheimer's, a Caregiver's Guide at the Charleston Community Center. The classes fill up every session. I'm back teaching EMT courses at Station 5. Chief Tucker welcomed me with a bear hug, said the station hadn't felt right without me. Every other Tuesday evening, we host an Alzheimer's caregivers support group here. 15 to 20 people gather in what we call Josephine's living room. Beverly helps organize it. June speaks occasionally. We serve coffee, share stories, cry together, laugh together. Joe would have loved seeing this house bring people together again. Martin showed up 2 months ago, the cousin who'd testified against me. He stood on my porch, hat in hands, and confessed that Lillian had paid him to lie. He apologized. I could have slammed the door. Instead, I invited him in for coffee. Everyone makes mistakes. What matters is what you do after. He volunteers at fund events now, trying to make things right. Then there's Mrs. Thompson, a woman I met through the support group. Her husband was just diagnosed with early-stage Alzheimer's at 65. She came to the first meeting terrified, barely able to speak. I recognized that terror. I'd felt it when Joe's doctor first said those words. I mentor them now. Visit every couple weeks, share what I learned. Love doesn't forget, even when memory does, I told her last week. You'll find moments of grace even on the hardest days. Beverly arrived at 6 with homemade lasagna. She does this twice a week, refuses to let me eat alone too often. We sat on the porch talking about the fund, about Joe, about healing. You've done something beautiful with Joe's legacy, Beverly said. She'd be so proud. I hope so. Some days I still talk to her. Tell her about the families we're helping. That's not crazy, that's love. Curtis stopped by around 7, fresh off his security shift. He grabbed a beer from my fridge, the privilege of 30 years of friendship, and joined us. We sat together as the sky turned from gold to purple to deep blue. You could have chosen bitterness, Curtis said quietly. But you chose purpose instead. Bitterness wouldn't honor her memory. By 9, they'd both headed home. I walked through the house slowly, room by room. The living room where Joe's wheelchair used to sit. The kitchen where we'd eaten breakfast for 38 years. The bedroom where I'd held her hand through that final night. Joe's portrait hung in the hallway, my favorite photograph taken when she was 50. She was laughing, her whole face lit up with joy. I stopped in front of it as I did most nights. Her letter still sat on the hall table. Don't let Lillian destroy what we built. I didn't let that happen, Joe, I said softly. And I built something more besides. People ask me if the fight was worth it, if I'd do it all again. I tell them yes. Some promises are worth keeping no matter the cost. Joe left me more than a house or money. She left me a mission: love fiercely, fight for what's right, forgive when possible, and build something meaningful. Lillian is serving her sentence. I visit because she's still my daughter, not because I've forgotten what she did, but because I choose to remember who she might still become. Maybe that's naive. Maybe it's hope. Dr. Monroe is rebuilding her practice and her conscience. She chose truth when it mattered most. Lucien will face his consequences. Some people burn their bridges beyond repair. As for me, I'm not defined by what I lost or who betrayed me. I'm defined by what I did with what remained. The security footage saved my case. June's records vindicated my care. Malcolm's strategy won in court. But it was Joe's love that carried me through all of it. In the end, that's what matters most. Not the money, not the house, the love, and that no one can take away. I stepped onto the porch one last time before bed. Joe's chair sat empty beside mine, where she'd spent countless evenings watching this same view. The wind chimes she loved tinkled softly. Peace settled over me. Not blazing happiness, but something deeper. Contentment. Purpose found in pain. Legacy honored. Home preserved. The lights inside glowed warm against the darkness. I sat down, looked at the empty chair, and smiled. "Good night, Joe," I whispered. "We did good, didn't we?" The wind chimes answered with their gentle song. And to you listening to this family story, remember this: God gave me strength when I had nothing left. When the legal papers arrived, when the accusations piled up, when my own daughter turned against me, God was there. In the darkest moments of this dad revenge journey, when I wanted to give up, I prayed. And he answered not always in the ways I expected, but always in the ways I needed. This family story taught me that documentation saves lives. If June hadn't kept those meticulous records, if we hadn't installed those cameras, if Malcolm hadn't fought with evidence instead of just emotion, I would have lost everything Joe and I built together. My dad revenge wasn't about anger. It was about protecting the truth. But here's what I want you to understand. Don't be like me. Don't wait until crisis strikes to document your caregiving journey. Don't assume family will always act with integrity. Don't ignore warning signs because you want to believe the best in people. I nearly lost everything because I trusted blindly. God teaches us to be wise as serpents and gentle as doves. I was gentle, yes, but I wasn't wise enough soon enough. I should have protected Joe's wishes legally from the beginning. I should have recognized Lillian's distance as a red flag. I should have asked more questions. This family story isn't just mine. It's a warning and a roadmap. If you're caring for someone with Alzheimer's, if you're navigating estate planning, if you see family members circling like vultures around a loved one's assets, act now. Document everything. Install cameras. Keep receipts. Get legal counsel. Don't wait for your own dad revenge moment to realize that love without protection is vulnerability. If this family story moved, you helped you, or taught you something valuable, please leave a comment below sharing your thoughts. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the stories we share here matter, and your support helps us reach families who desperately need to hear them. Share this video with someone who needs to understand the importance of protecting their loved ones legally and emotionally. Thank you for staying with me until the end. I know this wasn't easy to hear, but truth rarely is. A final note, the stories we share on this channel include fictionalized elements created for educational purposes. If this content isn't right for you, please feel free to explore other videos that better suit your preferences. We respect your choice. God bless you all.